The aviation sector continues to feel the pinch of the COVID-19 lockdown. Now, the International Air Transport Association has downgraded its traffic forecast for 2020. This after a dismal end to the summer travel season. The association now expects full-year traffic to be down 66%. This is compared with 2019. So to discuss this further, we're joined now by aviation specialist Linden Birns. Linden, thanks a lot for joining us this evening. A weaker than expected recovery for the year 2020 in air transport, down by 66%. Now, apart from imposed lockdowns from across the globe as a result of COVID-19, what else has been the contributing factors to this low number?
Hi, good evening. Yes, the lockdowns have been a huge impact, but at the same time, we're coming out of, or we're dealing with a pandemic and an accompanying economic recession as well. So people are feeling uneasy. They're feeling they need their confidence to be restored in the safety and the biosecurity of air travel. And at the same time, people have less money and businesses have less money to spend on travel. And so, if we bring this back to South Africa and we look at what's happening here in the tourism sector and why this issue with the poor interpretation of some of the COGTA regulations is so important and critical, is that we need to be able to capture as much of the market that does exist now, rather than seeing that evaporate just as we're starting to open up. And if we look at that, and I bring this also back to your previous segment about jobs, there are 270,000 South African jobs at risk directly in aviation and across the tourism and the supply chains of those two sectors. That's jobs at risk if we have prolonged, complex, opaque and arbitrary restrictions on travel, including quarantines. If we look at the traffic, and you were asking me at the beginning, what's the outlook? Yes, worldwide, we're expecting a 66% downturn compared to last year. In Africa, it's far worse. We're looking at 90% compared to last year. And critically, at an economic contribution level, we're looking at a loss of close to $37 billion in contributions to GDP on the continent as a result of these lockdowns and restrictions. So it really is critical that governments get aligned, that industry and governments work together to iron out any of these wrinkles very quickly. Yeah.
Well, as a result of ironing out some of these wrinkles very quickly there, Linden, unfortunately, we've got now news that Emirates has subsequently cancelled international flights to South Africa. Now, this does not necessarily help in this move towards actually recovering in the air transport sector.
It certainly doesn't. And look, there was a warning to government and a plea to government when the president announced that we were going to go to level 1. There was a plea to please ensure that whatever restrictions were put in place would be simple, straightforward, in line with the World Health Organization and the International Civil Aviation Organization recommendations, which do not include quarantine. They just simply say, let's have screening and testing before departure. We don't need to classify countries into high, medium, and low risk. It's very simple. If somebody is COVID positive or presents with symptoms before they depart, they do not get on an aeroplane. You don't need to overcomplicate the situation, because as we've seen, when you start doing that, you start to create reputational damage for the market. And that's exactly what we were trying to avoid and avert. And this is why, thankfully, government have got on top of this today. There is a meeting at the moment with the Ministers of Home Affairs, Health, Transport, and tourism to try and sort this out, because I think this really is down to a matter of misinterpreting, perhaps overzealously misinterpreting some of the regulations that were drawn up with the right intent, but are not being applied correctly.
Yeah, I mean, drawn up with the right intent, not being applied correctly, but we could also see the sector experience a further knock, right, as a result of the resurgence of certain lockdown regulations, especially in key markets. And looking at where we're sitting at globally, as well as some of the role that these key markets are playing, it does paint a rather grim picture in terms of the economic recovery for the sector, especially when we're looking into 2021.
You know, if we need to join the dots here, we're looking at a far slower than anticipated recovery. If we go back 4 or 5 months, we were talking about a V-shaped recovery, getting back to 2019 traffic levels within 2 to 3 years. Now we're talking about 4 years, if we're lucky. We're talking about an L-shaped recovery, bouncing along the bottom with a gradual incline. And we can join the dots and you can say, well, this also applies to things like, the plausibility of SAA's rescue. And there are so many different things that depend on this recovery. And this is why if these regulations are not sorted out quickly and the way that they're applied is done quickly, we're going to harm those markets. People are going to say, if there's a risk that I buy a ticket, if I'm sitting in Germany and I buy a holiday now to go to South Africa this week, and in 2 weeks' time, Germany suddenly gets reclassified as a high-risk country, I'm going to lose my holiday. Now, why then would people even consider booking a holiday and booking a ticket to come to South Africa if there's that risk? And this is why we've got to make sure that we do not deter the market at a time when it's absolutely precious and vital for our economy, vital for jobs, and vital for this industry. And we can do this and we can resume travel quite safely with very straightforward, uncomplicated rules.
Linden Birns will leave it there for this evening. Thanks a lot for joining us.